Hi, my name is Herb Pierce, and I teach something called the Enneagram. It's a personality typing system that talks about 9 personality styles, each of which has a very unique and distinct way of looking at reality and behaving based on the way that they tend to look at things. So tonight I want to talk about the 9 types in the Enneagram, and we have an example of each type, so we're going to learn. This will be a learning process about what each type is about. I've been teaching the Enneagram for about 17 years. I've taught close to 2,000 workshops, as well as trainings. I use it in counseling. I'm a therapist. And I wanted this to be an opportunity tonight to really value the differences between people. My core focus in using this system is really to have people understand each other more, understand themselves, and find much better ways to bridge the differences that often cause conflict that's really not useful. My goal very much is to create more peace and harmony, clarity, and appreciation for differences. I work a lot with couples and families and teams, and nothing pleases me more than people understanding and allowing people to be the way they are. So why don't we start? And I'm going to start with type 1, called the perfectionist, sometimes called the moral reformer. And I'm going to describe each type first. So type 1 is a person that focuses a great deal on doing things right. There's a right way and a wrong way, and ones have a very strong ideal about how things should be. So this type tends to be self-critical, can be critical of other people, and often works way too hard to make things a certain way instead of just letting things be the way they are. So let me just check in, Kathy, with you and see, does this fit you?
It does. It fits me to a T. I'm a lawyer by profession, and it suits me very well, because I do tend to break things down and strive very hard in life to do the right thing and the moral thing. And it's not always easy to know what that is, but I'm always trying to find it.
Okay, and have you learned to be more, the growth for the one is to be more relaxed, more accepting of differences, to see that there are many ways of doing things. And in a sense, there's not one right way, there are many right ways. Have you found that to be the case?
I have. As I've gotten older, I'm realizing more and more that when you most think that you're right is often when you're most wrong. When you have that strongest sense of conviction is often when you're missing something really major. And when you're a kid, you take your cues about what's right and wrong from your parents and your teachers. You have a line in your book, which I found very helpful. You said, for the one, childhood is child good. And as a little kid, I was always trying to be the good kid and the good servant. But then when you're an adult, who do you answer to? It's your parents, it's your friends, it's your siblings, it's your work colleagues, and then your own sense, whether you call it a higher authority or your own spiritual sense of what's right. And I found it very helpful in your book where you said, I'm saying, it's okay, don't worry so much about always getting it right. Loosen up a little bit, but don't be so hard on yourself, and don't be so hard on others.
And how has this helped you also in your relationships, to know your type and that other types are different?
Well, that was very helpful. One of the things you mentioned in the book is you said that sometimes type 1s do have difficulty realizing that other people are different. They think everybody looks at the world that same way, that everybody's trying very hard to do the right thing, and that's not going to motivate everyone. And I've been trying a little game where I try to be the different types, and I found that very, very helpful in my dealings with people at work and dealing with friends as well.
Good, thanks, Kathy. Let me mention my book since you mentioned it. This is the Complete Idiot's Guide to the Power of the Enneagram, and I'll talk about it later. You can order copies from me. I'll tell you how to do that if you're interested. So let's go to type 2, thanks. So Jen is a type 2. Type 2 is called the giver and the cheerleader. This is a type who, instead of the one's focusing on like how to do things right, the 2 is focusing on how do I please someone. You could call this type the pleaser too. I want to please someone so that they'll appreciate me, love me, make me feel special. This is an upbeat, very positive type, always trying to cheer people up. and really has a hard time if they can't really affect someone in a positive way. So does this describe you?
Like she said, to a T. I'm definitely a 2. In my profession, I'm a physical therapist, so that's pretty much my niche. I'm always cheerleading my patients on, no matter how bad their days are, and no matter how bad my day is. I always kind of hide that, and I'm always, no matter how negative I feel that day, I'm always positive to everybody. I'm always giving, to, you know, I exhaust myself sometimes. That's kind of like the bad part about being a 2. Because you're always giving, but you don't give to yourself. You're always giving to other people. So it's definitely my type, and actually I have the perfect job for my type right now.
Okay, so often jobs relate to the type you are. As a matter of fact, it's a good idea to have a job that reflects the qualities of your type. Can you talk about your one wing? Let me mention something about a wing now. A wing is an adjacent number to your type in which you have a flavoring of that quality of that type too. So a 2 with a 1 wing would be a little different. They'd have a little of the 1 quality, whereas a 2 with a 3 wing would be a little different. How is the 1 part of you also?
So in my apartment, I have to have things a certain way. And if someone, right now I'm living with my boyfriend, if he doesn't put things the way I want them placed, such as like candles on the table, if one's like over an inch too far, it upsets me. So I'm a perfectionist in the fact that something has to be placed just so. And as a 2, I think he should know this. Like he should know that that's what I want. I don't like to ask for my needs. So the 2 and the 1 kind of go back hand in hand at some point, where the 2 feels like everyone else should know what I want, even if I don't ask. I hint around, so hints should be enough. If I want the candle a certain way, it should be there.
2s are indirect. That's a really, a marker of the 2. They have a really hard time directly asking for their needs. Is that?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So because 2s guess what you want, they're always paying attention. This is what all the types do. They assume that you're looking at reality the same way, and they're not. All these 9 types are looking at life in a totally different way. It's so important to understand. If you can accept someone for their tendency and know that it's really, really difficult to change that tendency, they will love you. They'll really appreciate it. Is there anyone in here who doesn't want to be accepted for the way you are? There's going to be silence. I mean, because we all want to be accepted. And the Enneagram is an amazing tool of understanding to help you see how someone's inner world is like. Okay? Because the type is really more about your inner world, even though it's reflected out, particularly in extroverts. But it's what you think about and what you pay attention to. Sounds like you have a pretty strong 1 wing. But again, the 2 is more dominant. Is that true?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Always pleasing.
your dominant type is so important because it's automatic. Your type is what's automatic, and it's what you focus on without thinking at all. And it takes a great deal of correction in your life and ways to change that tendency. It's very hard for someone to change their type. It's very rare. I don't know if I've ever seen it. So let's go to type 3. So Lloyd, tell us about how you fit the description of 3, which is, this is an achiever, often an overachiever. They do a lot. They're goal-focused. They always are clear about a direction they're heading. They know what that looks like. They're always thinking of success. Very action-oriented, very positive. The 2 and 3 typically are very positive, image-oriented. Matter of fact, the 2, 3, and 4, we'll look at that in a bit, are called image types. Impression and looking good and that sort of thing is really important for the image types, 2, 3, and 4. So tell us how you fit the 3.
Well, in looking at some of the text around the number 3 in your book, I started smiling because I am one of those list kinds of persons where I have like a 1-week goal, a 5-week goal, a 5-year goal, a 10-year goal, a 20-year goal. And I just spent some time last weekend just typing up all of these little lists that I have, all these things, and I just felt like I had achieved so much because I had like 3 pages on the computer, single space, of all these things that I have to do over the next year or the next 6 months. So I'm always doing that, and I feel like I'm achieving something when I scratch those things out. I also, I have a closed room. I don't have a closet. I have a room just filled with clothes, and everything has to be in order. The colors are there. The shoes have to be polished. I have to dress appropriately. I think I own 5 tuxedos. It's like all of these things because I think that people should look good, or that I should look good, or as best I can when I go out. So that image thing is really very, very important to me, and I don't expect it from other people. It's just what I expect from myself.
Right.
And I have 3 careers, and I'm always juggling. I do set high goals for myself, and I really work to achieve them. When I was reading parts of your book, I started laughing because I don't think I'm really competitive. But then I looked, and I was the spelling bee champion for the city of Detroit, and I was in the yearbook, all throughout the yearbook, and all these things are there, and winning awards and just trying to be the best that I can be in a real positive kind of way.
Right.
The 2-piece part of me is that people pleaser part that needs to be around people a lot. I just get a lot of good energy from other people, so that the professor part of me, gets that satisfied, and then in my therapy work, that's the helping part of me gets that satisfied, and then in the theater work, then the flamboyant other piece of me gets satisfied. So it's a juggling act that seems to work. It's the Enneagram has helped me to be mindful of that without imposing a lot of self-judgment and criticism, allowing myself to be who I am. Right. And when you did the workshop for 3s, I was laughing because there were a lot of people there. I said, I'm nothing like that person when we first started. And then by the end of the evening, I was just laughing because I said, God, this guy's an astronaut, but wants to be an astronaut, but I'm so much like him. He's, it was really very, very funny to see how we do blend and mix in with other people who are the same type, but we have our own distinct personalities, but we are still so similar in so many ways.
It's amazing, I do type workshops for each separate type, and it's, even though the stories might be different, the approach is the same. It's so important to understand your type is about your approach. It's the blinders that you put on, which are both a strength, the ability to focus in the way that each type does, but it's also a limitation because the real beauty of the Enneagram is to develop the strengths of all 9 types. Mm-hmm. When you can see that you're limiting reality by over-focusing too much on one type, then you can expand yourself. People are often concerned about feeling limited by being typed. It's actually the opposite. Your type is limiting you often. So the whole idea is to kind of get out of your type, to be with the truth of the way that you might see reality as in a limited way is so helpful to know. So this is to help you enjoy the whole show, so to speak. So what about relationships? How has it helped you around relationships?
Being a 3, understanding this 2-piece to me, being a people pleaser has really enlightened me in the sense that I know how to set limits, and I have an understanding about the importance of parameters and how far I'm willing to go. And I try, I stay grounded in my 3-ness, but I'm also mindful of, the 2 creeping in at times and the 4 creeping in, because I am a hopeless romantic.
Right, and a type, the theory is that you can have qualities of each wing on either side of you. So some people have a bit of each wing, some people have more of one than the other. Truthfully, you can have qualities of all 9 types. Whatever your parents' types are affect you. Any major relationship you've been in for many years will have an effect. So the truth is we're all 9 types, and we're just looking objectively at what's true about one of the types that tends to be more of a pull. Let's go to type 4. So Melanie, type 4 is called the romantic. This is a type who's very romantic, for one thing. Very relationship-oriented. There's a lot of ideal and longing for an ideal mate or an ideal experience. This type is very spiritually oriented, to want to have deep experiences. They don't want the ordinary experience. They're always searching and longing for deep, more deep, often very psychological. They feel things deeply. They express things often either strongly or with great sensitivity. This is a very sensitive type. So this type is not a flatliner. It's typically much more up and down. This is an elevator type. Tell us about how this might fit you.
Well, I identify, I was reading in your chapter, I identify with pretty much everything that you say, and it's You were talking about being very relationship oriented, which I am, and part of that is my subtype, which I know you'll talk about a little bit later, sexual subtype, but also I'm relationship oriented just in terms of broader relationships as well. I'm a professor and I teach psychology, and all of my focus is on relationships, relationship between the individual and society, among groups, and between couples. And what's interesting is that the courses I teach very much reflect my type, the sensitivity, and I teach trauma and family violence and addictions and battered women, and basically all of the dark courses are my courses.
Right, let me just cut in. The dark side, this is a type that really explores the dark side. This type used to be called the tragic romantic. This type can focus a lot on sadness, pain, loss, etc. I'm sure you've never had that experience. So tell us.
I don't know suffering.
Yeah, this type is a value of this type. This type does not exclude suffering. Suffering is a part of reality, and that there a lot of types don't even want to touch that, but fours do. Is that true?
It's true, and I actually find it enjoyable. It's difficult, but there's something transformational about being able to do the work that I do. It feels transformative. It feels authentic. It feels empowering, and it feels artistic. And that's the other part of me. I'm an artist and a musician, and I always have been. And so I wound up going into academia and trying to kind of integrate all those different parts of me in something that would really address relationships and address suffering, and do it in a way that felt real.
So would you say that individuality also is a part of this mix for you? The importance of being unique and individual?
Yes, I always felt sort of like an outsider all my life. Now that I know the Enneagram, it's been tremendously empowering. My 4 friends and I speak our own language, and we understand that we're not crazy, we're just 4s. But we all had a similar experience where we felt somehow like we were fundamentally different than a lot of other people, and it was hard to connect or to find the kind of connections that we like. We like strong connections. But being my own self and not kind of playing by other people's rules if I don't agree with them, very important to me, really challenging authority, challenging ideas, and seeing how they fit in with who I am rather than just doing what I'm told.
Exactly. This is a nonconformist type. There are a few other types that have an edge of that too, but this type really wants to be an individual, and any pressure to conform too much is like, no way. This type also, like you mentioned, can feel like an outsider because of that tendency to want to be individual. Mm-hmm. So there needs to be a certain attention not to be different or possibly rebel, just to be an individual. Mm-hmm. That it's okay to fit in, it's okay to be average, it's okay to be normal. This is really the growth of the type toward just being more, quote, normal. Mm-hmm. Not having to be that different. Thanks. Okay. Let's go to type 5. This is called the observer or thinker. This is someone who, whereas the 4 is very emotional and there's a real attunement to emotions, not that 5s can't, but this is a type that likes to look at life analytically. They're very intellectual. They're particularly aware of ideas, theories, concepts. They tend to represent life through ideas. They study reality. This is the most detached type. They can step back and not get overly reactive, the tendency, and just look at life objectively. Often when a 5 speaks, and sometimes they don't speak as much unless they're talking about their favorite subject, when a 5 speaks, I listen because when they say something, it's distilled. This is not a type that repeat things a lot or chat, or the last thing they want to do is go to a party and do a lot of small talk. They want substance, and they typically are academic or study things in depth. They usually have a lot of books. They're on the internet. Knowledge. This is a knowledge feeding system. So how does this fit you?
Well, you couldn't have described me better. It's been how I've operated in the world since I was a kid. So in any situation, almost the first thing I will gear toward is what is going on, what is true, like what is the reality about this. And the description is more like what are the parts and how do they fit together. It's more like an objective description. It almost seems to me once I have the description, I have the whatever it is. Some situations that can kind of be miss the point. So an example I was thinking of when you were talking is popular music. Like when I was growing up, like, oh, this song is so great, and you listen to this, and I would be like, well, what's the point? I would be songs be like, well, I mean, the lyrics were often kind of stupid. Like, that can't be the point. You know, that can't be like what people are raving about. You know, it's like, is it the melody? But somehow the idea that it was the feeling that it would induce in you, that went right over my head. Like I was looking for it in the wrong place. So it's like hard to relate to. What are all these people relating to? You know, and so that's been a kind of a growth into for me, is to be able to acknowledge that something may exist on an emotional level, and that can be the point. So yeah, I'm very much come at it mentally, come at it as an observer, and sort of try to understand something. I'm very big on, do I understand this, and trying to get it right, make sure my perception of it is accurate. That's like really big on me. I'll like, is this true? And I'll test my hypothesis. If I'm right, then this will be, you know, kind of a natural scientist.
Exactly. You know, a 5 is like a knowledge perfectionist. You know, and actually I didn't mention this about the 4. The 4 is kind of an emotional perfectionist, you know. So it doesn't mean that each type doesn't have their own kind of a perfectionist type focus, but the focus here is on the mind. What happens if you have strong feelings that just show up spontaneously?
Well, probably that's usually very uncomfortable. I'll, whether it's a strong feeling of anger or love or sadness or joy, it's something that, gosh, this doesn't fit with my scheme, so I'll try to, you know, suppress it, or I might, if it's upsetting enough, I might blame it on the person or the situation and try to get out of there. One of the things you didn't mention is we can be kind of minimalists. We're really big on our ability to do without, whether that's stuff or people or experiences. And I guess we don't want to do without our knowledge, but everything else, sort of almost pride ourselves on how little we can get by on. Part of it is the idea that there's no guaranteeing it will, you know, be there, or that you don't have any control over an experience or a relationship with a person. It's sort of too chaotic. So it's better off not to need it. Better off not to count on it.
5s are very concerned about being intruded on. You know, they want their private space on average. Now, 5 can talk it up. If they're talking about their favorite topic, you might want to cut them off, you know, because they can go on and on about a knowledge-based topic. But generally, 5s are private, and everyone needs downtime, but 5s in particular often need a lot of downtime. So it's really important, you know, when you're with the 5, if you want to relate to them every 5 seconds, this is not the type to choose, you know.
Yeah, that definitely applies to me. It's, you know, the idea, you know, someone wants to talk to you every day. I'm like, why? What's happened the last day? That's so important.
Why say anything unless there's need for it? Small talk, you know. A couple hours of silence, great.
Yeah, I'm like that. Like in a group conversation, I might be sitting there and people think I'm like not even listening, but I'm like taking in the whole thing, and then I might like make one comment that like summarizes the whole thing, and be like, wow. You know, they didn't even know I was listening.
5s really, it's amazing. I used to, when I taught workshops, and 5s would often go through a whole workshop and not say a word. And I'm going like, did they like it or not? You know, and they usually are not so expressive either. But often they're the ones that know the most. They're the ones paying attention the most often. So, you know, the nonverbal signals don't always show what's happening inside. Just something to keep in mind. Let's go to 6. Thanks. It's David. Carol's a 6. So a 6 is called the questioner, sometimes the guardian. This is someone who questions everything. Now, 5s question things a lot too. There's some similarity between these two types. But 6's questioning has a strong focus on security, on wanting to know what's going to happen, what's predictable, what might go wrong, what if, yes, but. So there's a lot of like concern. typically. This type likes to plan. They like to know what the possibilities might be. It's hard to just trust that everything will just be fine and unfold and like that. And so this type also, one of the ways to actually to understand this type or to detect this type is they ask a lot of questions. I'm sure you've had in your life people say to you, wow, you ask a lot of questions. Is that true?
Yeah, hello. Yeah, I've often gotten in trouble actually for asking a lot of questions. It was really a relief, to find out about this typing, and like I was just kind of trying to understand the world the way I'm set out to understand the world, as opposed to just being a pain in the butt for everybody. So, and I was always like, from my parents, why do you ask those questions? Or, don't worry about that. That's another, I get that a lot from people. Well, just don't worry about it. But, and like going into the workplace, and I'm hired to do one job, and I think I'm hired to like oversee the whole organization, but what about that? And what about, and it gets me sometimes in trouble. Someone gives me like new information. I might, my first response is, but what about, and I see. So on the positive side, I'm able to like analyze things and see weaknesses, and you mentioned the guardian, and I've worked in human services, and the kinds of like volunteer activities I participate in, usually, I've read this, you've said it, favor the underdog. I want to make sure that they're being treated right, everybody's getting their share. And I think when I was listening to the five speak, the truth is really important. I remember doing a workshop with you, and I think you said something about, for another type, they'll go to the mat, it's more important than relationships. And I realized I've actually sometimes sacrificed or compromised a relationship or a job or whatever the immediate thing is, just to get at the truth is so important, And I've learned through the workshops to appreciate that not everybody really appreciates the truth to that extent, and there are other types who are working against that. So it's just really helped me to be compassionate and not be so jazzed up about, my knowing the truth. And even if I see something somebody else may not want to be talking about, I can let them be.
Right. I mean, sixes in particular
Really?
really like to dig to see what's true. You could call this type the detective. They're very, very good. You don't want to try to deceive a six.
Yeah.
Sixes are they're always ferreting out like what's below the surface, okay? So you might as well be honest. I tell people in relationship with sixes, and I mentioned I specialize working with couples, that with a six, you might as well be honest. You might as well fess up to what's happening, and you might as well answer the yes, buts, and what ifs, because the six will feel more secure. They'll relax more, because they're always thinking of what might happen. So if you're hiding something, it's much worse, much worse.
Has been. Yeah, and
Often
I think
has
as
been.
I've gotten older and also worked this more in my life and done other kinds of growth, that it's not so important for me to get that from everybody. And I actually see there can be an unkindness in that ferreting that you're talking about,
Right.
And insensitivity.
Right, so that's great that
yeah.
you've been detecting that.
Yeah.
Because, what happens is like we're just being ourselves, we're just being natural, but other people of other types are at the other end, and like all those questions might be really hard for people. For one thing, a lot of people can't answer the questions, or they don't know, and it's genuine, they're not necessarily hiding. Many people don't explore that much. Fours and sixes typically, like really explore, particularly people dynamics and the undercurrents. Okay, fives like to explore deeply too, but it's typically more for more pure knowledge. So it's so important to understand that when you understand other types, you see what will motivate them more than just what your type needs. Okay, thank you. Let's go to type 7. Whereas 6s tend to kind of question and prepare and are very protective, another great quality of 6. 7s can do all that too, but the main thing that 7s are noted for, the optimist. This is someone who's bright, positive, upbeat, like all the time. They don't want to they can solve problems quickly, but they don't want to deal deeply with problems. They don't want to deal with complaint and pain. Their focus is to keep the bright side, keep the energy up. So this type tends to do a lot of things, a lot of new and different things. They want to focus on the positive, put that spin in a way that really is going to make the situation work. Now they can avoid sometimes what's negative or difficult, and that can be a problem for people too. The good of any type is also going to be a problem for some people. So have you found that you're really positive and upbeat, and have you found in your life journey that it's really good also to focus on difficulties and problems and pain more immediately?
Well, I find that, so I'm generally upbeat and I love to just try new things. I'm involved in a ton of different activities, all of them fun, of course, and in a wide variety of arenas. And I tend not to want to commit to any one thing because that might preclude some other opportunity, me being able to take advantage of some other opportunity.
Right, that's one of the qualities of 7 too. They want to keep their options open. Freedom is the call word.
Very important. And so the dark side of that is, of course, when you're in a committed relationship, it's really important, and I've learned over time, especially doing some of your workshops, just how important it is to understand that not everyone is like me. That just because I'm interested in taking advantage of all these different opportunities, sometimes that's detrimental to the relationship, the different relationships that I'm in.
Right.
Especially as a mom and with my husband, I'm out a lot. I like to, take advantage of things that come up, and I'm involved in lots of different organizations that also take me into things that I just enjoy doing. So it's a lot about being able to enjoy my life.
Right, and what's your name?
Joy.
Right, so it's a perfect fit. This is one of the types that's got named properly, So this is the joy type. Many people want to be this type. This is a type that's often envied. At the same time, sometimes a 7 can miss out on the certain depth of life. Mm-hmm. And I know you personally, so I know that you've really balanced that. You really allow difficulty and problems to be there without avoiding or skating or doing the next fun activity to avoid it. So that's really good. That's the purpose of balancing your type, is to do the opposite. So for the 7s, the joy type needs to focus on balancing with some attention to pain so that it's not denied. It's part of life. Pain's part of life. Hopefully joy is a big part of life. Okay?
Right.
So, good, thanks.
You're welcome.
I'm going to talk about, after we interview the 9 types, I'm going to talk about subtypes a bit, okay? Because within each type, there's a number of subtypes. We're talking a little bit about wing, which is the adjacent number. By the way, what's your wing?
I have a pretty strong 6 wing. However, I think that's been developed more since I've become a mom. I also can have a pretty strong 8 wing when I need to. I don't back down from conflict. I take charge. I'm like a real just go in there and just get things done. And I can have a much bigger energy than just an average 7. So I think I'm almost fairly balanced.
Good.
Actually.
And that's a real good way to use the Enneagram, is to, typically one wing is a little more there, and you can balance it by, if you have both wings balanced, you can work on developing that other wing a bit. The higher qualities of, matter of fact, with all the Enneagram things where you want to balance and use some of the traits of the other types, obviously you want to develop the higher traits, not the quote, more dysfunctional traits. Matter of fact, let me just use this as an opportunity now to say there are many levels of maturity within each type. So we're just giving you kind of a ballpark. Now, the folks here that we're interviewing are fairly developed. Most of you have done a lot of workshops, you've grown, you've used life to go deeper with life, okay? But many people, each of the types that we're talking about can be very dysfunctional. So I'm also going to talk about some of the higher traits and the lower traits of each type after we interview. Let's go to type 8. Type 8 you could call the boss, you can call the director, the powerhouse. This is a type who has a lot of energy. This type they like to express directly what they're experiencing. Very strong-willed, a lot of energy, speak out. They don't go after conflict, but they don't avoid it. I mean, some 8s will go after conflict, but they're not afraid of it. I mean, they like to, being indirect is really hard for an 8. They want things right out. So when you're talking to an 8, you want to talk to the type. Just like with all the types, when you're talking to an 8, you want to be direct. When you're talking to a 7, you want to have a little bit of fun and excitement. When you're talking to a 6, you want to, have some focus on what else is there that's not being talked about, like level everything out. So each type has a certain way. While I'm going around, let's do type 5. You want to have some intellectual, interest and excitement, or otherwise it's not going to land well. With the 4, you want to be personal and deep and share your guts and share what's really happening, like what's really happening this moment. With a 3, you can do all of that, but you also want to focus on what can work. This can happen. 3s believe anything can happen and come to fruition if you just focus on your goals. Amazing. So all these types are your best support systems for that kind of thing if you're wanting it in your life. The 2 is amazingly tuned in to what you need. I mean, like radar, and they'll give to you, and it's also an example of you to give to others, but at the least what 2s want is some appreciation for that attunement. Okay, very positive. The 1 is incredibly committed to living the highest ideals, living according to your principles. That there is a sense of rightness in the world that is beautiful, so, right?
Right.
I mean, every type is amazing. The type 8 strength is like live. The 8 says, let's live. You're here today. Express yourself, be yourself, empower yourself. I worked with this wonderful woman who helped me empower myself. Suzanne, I did some work, and it was there was a strong focus on empowerment. And I'm smart enough to use each type. Every type wants to be used, because every type is so amazingly gifted at what they do as the type. So tell us about empowerment. Tell us about also the difficulty, because the underneath level of empowerment is vulnerability. This type has a harder time like showing their insecurity, weakness, fear, and doubt, but they like to lead with strength.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing. You go through life, and it is about you're here now, be direct, go do what you want to do. You could be dead tomorrow, so you may as well do what you want to do. It really bothers me when people talk around in circles. It's like, get to the point, My ex-significant other used to always ask me what I was doing that evening. What he really wanted to know was, did I need the car? Hello? Ask if you need the car. It's not that big a deal,
Get to the point.
Just get to the point. Just, don't waste my time. But the other side of it is there is a vulnerability. And we tend to be really emotional people. And sometimes we have a hard time understanding what those emotions are. And sometimes we have a hard time in terms of really dealing with that stuff. And I've worked really hard on being able to really understand what those vulnerabilities are, to be more direct with folks about what's going on with me. And Herb did work with me. I do hypnosis, and one of the really great things about doing hypnosis is it's about getting down to the cause behind what people think is going on and helping people empower themselves by what it is they don't know they know inside themselves. And it also slows me down a lot because 8s tend to think real fast. It's just, go do it already, But when you're working with folks, you have to be in their energy. You need to slow it way down, be present with them, talk at the same rate, use their vocabulary so it really talks to their unconscious mind. So it's been very helpful in terms of being more empathetic to folks. I used to get a lot of stuff from the folks around me who are my friends, and I have some very close friends, and they'd say to me stuff like, I can't do with all that energy you have. I don't know if any of you understand what that means, but that's kind of hard because that's who I am,
Right.
But through the working in the hypnotics, it's been really good because it's been able to help me slow it down and to understand, oh, if I'm working with a kinesthetic feeling kind of person, they got to feel their feelings. And then if you're lucky, they might get in touch with what those feelings mean. So it's like a two-step, slow down kind of process.
You know, I've seen you grow so much, honestly, you know, like years ago when I knew you, like, there was just a much faster pace that could be overpowering, which you were just being yourself, but you're so much more, like, you've slowed down, you're attuned to difference. I mean, I think this system, among many other things you do too, has been amazingly helpful to have you be a really well-rounded person.
Yeah, I think that's true too. And actually, you know, one of the things that I wanted to raise, because I think it's kind of interesting in terms of opposite types. My ex-husband, he's a 9 with a 1, so he's totally my opposite, totally. And I guess I'll let him talk a little bit about that. But one of the things that Herb and other people have worked with, the two of us as a couple, said, you know, how did you ever last as long as you did? We were together for 22 years. And when I think about it, I'm just like, how did that exactly work for 22 years? Because he'd be the feeling type, and he'd get really angry real quick, and I'd be like, just cut to the chase, and, you know, all this passive-aggressive stuff made me nuts, and I don't know how we did it, but we're much better friends now that we're not living together. It's amazing how that worked out, and it's okay, you know. You can do
I think,
that.
you know, I think, you know, some of the work that you did together helped you be able to understand each other
Oh,
and the
definitely.
differences, so that it's just easier. Let's go to the type of your ex-husband. This is not him, by the way. Type 9, the peacemaker or peacekeeper, accommodator. This is a type that on the surface, you know, is yields easily, is receptive, very agreeable, very accommodating, often peace at any price, very flexible. They kind of merge and meld, and, you know, just, they're easy. It sounds pretty good. And it is good. I'm a type 9 myself. At the same time, this type tends to avoid conflict. They often avoid their individuality. They tend to blend with you rather than speak up for their own individual self. Sometimes they might lack a certain passion. Actually, there's more passion inside, except the 9 kind of talks in a really nice, comfortable. Comfort's really important. They typically dress real comfortably. You know, they just want to enjoy life and be with things. Very easy to be with this type on average. But underneath there can be some of the passive aggressiveness or some of the repressed anger, you know, that you had talked about. And I encourage 9s all the time to go after what they want and to, you know, be more strong-willed, etc. So tell us how any of this is you.
Well, it's all me. The passive aggressive thing is very strong, and 9s, or at least for me, we're masters at it. We look really good on the surface. We look like nothing's going wrong inside. Anger is a big problem because anger is conflict, and I just stay away from that, or I had in the past, and very scared of anger. And the merging thing, to merge with all other types or anybody, it all kind of sounds good on the surface, but I end up going home alone, and I'm very, very good at being selfless, but struggle with being selfish in a positive way.
That's really well said. I mean, you know, as a 9 myself, I can relate. I know I used to give in so much to what felt like other people's needs, repressing myself. Today, I'm much more selfish. Matter of fact, I run groups for 9s, and one of our mottos is "Be selfish." You know? And it actually works for other people. Have you found that, like, the more self-centered you are, that actually works better in relationship?
Yeah, the times that I can actually stir up enough directness to just say what I want instead of beating around the bush and being direct with people, people they just love it. And as a matter of fact, I've grown to a point of being a 9 that I don't like people being a 9 towards me. People come to me and they kind of beat around the bush and they're wishy-washy about what they want, and I just want to strangle them. I just, don't be like that, because it's a mirror for me. I've been like that my whole life.
Right. It's hard to watch your former self in someone else. And you see, the 9's passivity, the 1's criticality, the 2 like over-helping, and being way too kind of intrusive in a way, and they're helping. The 3, like achieving, great, but achieving to such a degree they might not be tuned into a relationship, Might not be true of you now, but it may possibly in the past, because achievement can go overboard. The 4's emotional intensity and depth can be like, whoa, I didn't expect to be on stage tonight or be dealing with these intense feelings. The 5 can have great conversations, but maybe under the surface there's a lot of emotion that needs to be talked about. The 6 sometimes misses the security that they're in. Maybe things are okay. Maybe there's nothing to detect. That for a few seconds there's safety. The 7 can, over-focus on the positive so much that they don't see that there's something of connection that will happen when you really, really deeply connect to what's difficult. Sometimes the 8, misses the subtleties and the sensitivities that might be there because they're not loud. Because the 8 tends to kind of be strong and bold, and like you were saying, the 9 sometimes misses out on the, life can be a blast when you're also strong in yourself too. You don't have to give in. Good, well thanks. Anything else you want to say about being a 9?
No.
Okay, yeah. It's a laid-back type. Let me talk a little bit about subtypes. Subtypes, or often called instinctual subtypes, are areas that we focus on in life. For instance, all people focus at times on what's called the sexual subtype, which is the mating instinct. The whole area of life that's focused on being close and connecting and merging and being in a really deep relationship, those kinds of things, which include feelings like jealousy and that sort of thing. Social subtypes are people that focus more on groups, organizations, friends, family, but they like to see life, and it's really important for them to experience life in being socially valued, being part of something, not being rejected, connecting people, more of a community focus. We do all 3 of these. Self-preservation subtypes in the Enneagram, but in life in general we do these things too, are more focused on basics, food, shelter, clothing, comfort, temperature, money in the bank. So when those kind of things are covered, each of the subtypes like to cover those things first to feel secure, then they deal with the others. So for instance, who's a sexual subtype here? Okay, let's focus on Mel first. So how does that show up for you?
Well, since I'm a 4 already, and then being a sexual subtype, it's kind of like a double whammy. But I'm comfortable in, not having a lot of money in the bank if that happens. I don't really care about whether, I'm really comfortable with my social circles. It doesn't bother me at all. But if there's, if my boyfriend sneezes, I might have a panic attack. That's an exaggeration, but I'm, really, the area that I'm most, I get most stressed in is my relationship.
Yeah,
And
security is...
Well, it's the area that I know I need to grow the most in, and that I have to focus. I focus a lot of attention on to become more secure in that area.
Right. It's all about security. So sexual subtypes will feel more insecure than the other 2 subtypes around intimate relationship issues. And this could be deep friendship too. Is that true for you, Jen?
Yes, if a relationship isn't working out, my 2 breaks down, and I'm not as cheery, and I'm not as positive, and I'm not as helpful, because I feel I've failed being in my relationship. So if I can't help that person with my relationship, then how am I going to help others? So I really, if my relationship isn't good, then I fall apart, and I'm not as helpful to other people. I really need that security. I need that relationship to work out, or nothing else will work out for me. Right. I'll have the worst day ever. Right.
A lot gets placed when you're in a subtype. The sexual subtype focuses on the partner or pursuing a partner. Let's check social subtype. Who's a social subtype here? How does that show up for you?
Well, I think it's really important to have friends around you that really like you. And I've been lucky enough to have people who have come up and said they really admire, again, the growth and development and the things that I've done in my life, despite other things that had happened previously.
Are friendships really important to you?
Friendships are hugely important, and one of the things that Herb and I were talking about before the show started was how that plays out. And one of the things that played out is when I got married, well, actually before I got married to my now ex, husband, I had told him that, I have this wonderful friend from college and we're close, we're like brother, sister. And we've always taken care of each other through the years. I said, there might not be anything there that you find attractive or anything that you care about, values-wise, and it doesn't matter. He's the family and you better accept him. I don't care if you accept any of my other family, my biological family. But this one person, he needs to be accepted because he's like the most important thing in my world, other than you. And he did the same thing with his wife as well.
I had just a short story of a social subtype 8 I know, who, when her husband proposed to her, he's a 5, self-preservation 5. She said to him as an 8 that if my friends call me in the middle of the night, I'm going there. That is priority, and if you can't handle that, we're not going to get married. Of course, he's a self-preservation 5 who likes privacy. He said, great, fantastic, we have a deal. So, the marriage worked, So, David, how is this true for you as social subtype?
Well, I've noticed that probably the single most important thing for whether I'm feeling good about myself is whether I'm kind of valued in a group context. So, like, especially being a 5 who's into ideas, I was an academic professor for a lot of years, and the most important thing was, well, first there was discovering the ideas and being wowed by how cool they are, which I could spend hours on my own, in my own world, like being amazed by how awesome the world is, or my ideas are, or other ideas are. But then there was the part about wanting to publish them and wanting to be them for other people to say, wow, David, that's really cool. And I've often thought, like, when I look around, other people are really popular at this and that, and, the pang of, like, but who likes me? There's always the part of me, like, but my contribution is that I know things. And so there's this wish that I would be valued for my knowledge and as somebody who keeps information alive, how to do things, how the world works, and so on. So that's been a huge factor in whether, something, I have a good day or a bad day, might be whether I feel received and appreciated in that way. It's not by one other person. I mean, it's okay by one other person, but what matters is that in some kind of community context, that my contribution matters.
Exactly, and that will become much more of a survival feeling issue. Yeah. For instance, I'm a sexual subtype, and I'm a social second, so you often have a tiered quality. The social thing is so important for me, but my survival issues get kicked in much more strongly in my partner relationship.
I think for me it's going to be the social relationships that become very, very important. And when I mentioned earlier about seeing myself in the 2 and seeing myself in the 4, when you mentioned that that you teach psychology, I teach psychology also, and you mentioned the whole thing about being an artist. I'm also an artist, have that kind of expression happening. But it's very, very important for me to be able to give within the context of a group. And so I see that happening for me, and I see that actualized in teaching and also working with clients and doing the kind of healing work that I do. It becomes very, very important. And when I think about relationships, I think that they kind of, they're very, very important to me, but they kind of take a second to that social aspect of my being, because the way I give and the way I feel that I'm valued in my profession is very, very important to me. And I really get a lot of energy from that. That gives me fuel. And I think that maybe in the more intimate kind of relationships that I would expect that the person is going to be able to sustain, their place in the world the way I sustain myself.
Exactly. We project onto subtype are really important because we project onto important people in our lives that they might have the same kind of world importance. And again, when you can understand someone so much more when you understand what's a real deep priority. And if it's not a priority for you, you really have to pay attention to see what it is for someone else. Let's go to self-preservation. I know you're self-preservation.
Yeah. I could care less about relationships. I could care less about being social. When I go into survival mode, it's I walk out the door. I leave my wife behind. I don't want to go social. I just want to be alone. I go to my comfortable places. I do my comfortable things, and I really don't care about anything else. It's survival. It's my cave. I go. I do routine things. I just get away. I want to be alone.
Right, and that's, there's the subtype of the 9 self-preservation is called the Comfort 9. So there's like 27 particular descriptions. So just to show you that the Enneagram is so beautifully complex. I mean, it really honors individuality and uniqueness. You know, I've been using this system myself personally for 17 years, and I feel like when I started using it, it saved my life. I was in a relationship with a woman I did not understand at all. We were even teaching relationship workshops together. And within a weekend, I understood, you know, what she was about. Let me say some things about the work I do, just so you understand the range of things that this can operate in. I teach workshops. A number of you have mentioned workshops. I do Enneagram workshops, a basic night where I act out the types with props. I like to entertain people, make it kind of funny. I also do a type workshop for each separate night. We might have a 1 night, a 2 night, a 3 night, etc. And in that night, it's actually open to anybody, but it's particularly open to that type and people in relationship with that type. Because when you understand someone's type, it's amazing how any form of relating can be so much better when you deeply understand it. Because the person, most people are not trying to harm you in any way. They're just being who they are. I also do team building trainings in organizations so that a team can work together effectively by knowing the type differences. And I usually do an analysis of the team so things can work better. How to communicate to this type, how to communicate to that type, how to support the effectiveness of this type more so they actually can produce. It's really helpful in organizations. I give talks to groups, clubs. I've done knitting groups. I've done the U.S. Navy. I mean, I've done many different kinds of organizations, and it's useful for all of this. Let me I also do couples communication weekends. Just in summary, I just want to say that the Enneagram is, for me, the best tool that I've ever explored around valuing difference, understanding differences. I teach many other systems, by the way. But this particular system hits a real emotional and spiritual depth. You can use this system to free yourself from the suffering aspect of being in a type. To me, that's the best way is to appreciate the beauty of all the differences that we deal with in life. And all the differences that we meet in life are ways in which we can develop those qualities in ourselves, thank God, and allow people to be the way they are, and relationships will improve to that degree. So, my book. I just want to mention my book again, The Complete Idiot's Guide to the Power of the Enneagram, and you can buy it from me. I think my contact information is on the screen, so just give me a call. If you have any questions, honestly, give me a call. I love people to call me. Send an email. My website is herbpearce, PEARCE.com. And, I hope you decide to attend, some workshop or, do some kind of Enneagram experience.